I used to think people exaggerated when they said someone's voice could stay with you, that it could echo long after the words themselves had faded. I don't think that anymore. Not since the night she said my name like it wasn't meant to be heard. The first time I saw her, she was standing behind the counter of the repair shop, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back like she'd just given up on trying to keep it neat. My best friend, Liam, had dragged me there to help fix his car's air conditioner. Quick job, he said, but we'd been waiting for nearly an hour. She moved like someone used to being watched, but no longer cared. Every motion economical, precise. I remember thinking she looked more like she owned the place than worked there. Grease smudged on her wrist, gold ring mark pale against her skin where something used to be. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said, wiping her hands. Her voice had that calmness that made you want to listen, even if she was just listing prices. Liam did most of the talking. He always did. I just nodded along, pretending not to notice the faint smell of engine oil and jasmine when she leaned closer to show him something on the clipboard. When she glanced at me, it wasn't flirtation, more like curiosity, the kind that lingers just a second too long to feel ordinary. Eli, right? She asked, eyes catching mine. I nodded. Yeah, you're Claire. The name fit her, soft edges hiding something unspoken. We didn't talk much after that. Liam cracked jokes, she smiled politely. But there was a quiet between us that had its own shape, like an unfinished sentence. Later, when Liam went outside to take a call, I stayed behind, leaning against the wall, pretending to scroll through my phone. Claire was at her desk, typing something. A faint hum from the air conditioner filled the silence. You don't talk much, do you? She said, without looking up. I hesitated. Depends who's asking. That made her smile barely. You sound like trouble. Not really, I said. Just careful. She looked up then. Something flickered across her face. Recognition maybe, or memory. Careful's not a bad thing, she murmured. For a second, the only sound was the ticking of a wall clock. Then Liam came back, loud and oblivious, and whatever quiet thing had been building just broke apart. We left after that, but I kept thinking about the way she'd said my name when we shook hands goodbye. Not Eli, like an introduction, but softer, almost like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. That night, when I lay in bed, I tried to replay it in my head. The tone, the breath, the half-smile. I told myself it didn't mean anything, just a sound, just politeness. But it lingered anyway, curling around the edges of my thoughts like smoke. I heard it the next day when Liam called me from the shop. I heard it in the hiss of the espresso machine at the cafe. And sometimes, when everything else went quiet, I could still hear her whisper it the way she did. Soft, low, like she wasn't supposed to. I don't know why that moment stuck. Maybe because she didn't seem like the kind of woman who said names that way. Or maybe because no one had ever said mine like that before. Either way, I keep hearing it. And somehow, it doesn't sound like it's going to stop. The second time I saw Claire, she was trying to fix a jammed drawer behind the shop counter. Her hair was shorter, like she'd cut it herself, uneven at the ends, and there was a streak of black grease across her temple. Liam had forgotten his wallet at her place, apparently, and I offered to go fetch it for him. I told myself it was no big deal. But when she looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, the surprise in her face said she hadn't expected me either. Oh, she said, straightening up. You again. Your favorite customer's brother forgot his wallet. I held it up like evidence. Her smile was faint but real. He forgets everything. Comes with the charm, I guess. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I leaned against the counter, watching her struggle with the drawer again. She muttered something under her breath, soft enough that I only caught the rhythm, not the words. You want a hand with that? I asked. She hesitated, just a second too long, then stepped aside. If you think you can outsmart 50 years of rust. I crouched down, tugged gently, and it gave way after a few tries. Inside were scattered receipts, a chipped mug, and a tiny photo of a younger version of her. Same eyes, fewer lines. She noticed me looking and quickly closed the drawer again. Thanks, she said, quieter this time. Her tone had changed. The lightness she used with customers was gone. What remained was something closer to fatigue, or maybe self-protection. You've been busy, I said, nodding toward the piles of invoices. She gave a small, tired laugh. Busy's just another word for avoiding things. There it was, the first real crack in her composure. I wanted to ask what she was avoiding, but something in her posture, the way her shoulders lifted, then held, told me not to. So I just stood there, listening to the faint buzz of the ceiling fan and the sound of her pen tapping against the counter. Her hands caught my attention again. There was a small scar on her thumb, a silver band on her index finger, not a wedding ring, but something she kept touching unconsciously. A habit, or a memory. She caught me looking and smiled, but not like before. More like she was aware of the distance between us and was reminding me to stay on my side of it. I should get back to work, she said. Yeah, sure. But neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavier, filled with all the things we weren't saying. The sound of traffic outside, the ticking clock, even the faint hum of the radio. It all seemed to fade until the only thing that existed was her, standing close enough that I could see the faint rise and fall of her breath. She reached for the drawer again, and for a moment, her hand brushed mine. Barely, but it was enough to make everything still. Her fingers trembled before she pulled away. Thanks for the help, she said, voice uneven now. I wanted to say something back, something that wouldn't sound like too much, but she was already walking away. And all I could do was stand there, hands still warm from the touch that shouldn't have happened, wondering why it suddenly felt like a secret we were both pretending not to keep. It was raining that night, not the cinematic kind, just the steady kind that turns everything dull and heavy. Liam had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving his car at the shop for some overdue work. I stopped by to drop off a part he'd ordered, expecting to leave it on the counter and go. But the lights were still on, even though it was past closing. Through the fog glass, I saw Claire sitting at her desk, one lamp casting a soft gold halo around her. She looked smaller somehow, jacket draped over her shoulders, glasses slipping down her nose, a half-finished cup of coffee beside her. I knocked. She looked up, startled, then smiled when she recognized me. You have terrible timing, you know that? Would have come earlier if the traffic didn't drown half the city, I said, stepping inside. The smell of rain mixed with motor oil and coffee, oddly comforting. She took the box from me. Thanks. You didn't have to come in this weather. I didn't mind. That silence again, the kind that starts soft and turns into something else if you let it linger. I noticed her hands shaking slightly as she tried to open the box. She'd taken off her rings this time. The faint marks around her fingers caught the light. You okay? I asked. She nodded, too quickly. Just tired. Her voice cracked on the word tired, and she turned away as if she'd said too much. I caught the faint sound of her exhale, the kind you release when you're holding something heavier than you want to admit. She tried to change the subject. Liam mentioned your job hunting? Trying to, I said. Not going great. Nothing ever goes great at your age, she said softly. That's the curse of wanting too much, too soon. There was warmth in her voice, but also a thread of bitterness, like she was speaking to herself more than to me. Outside, thunder rolled. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. We stood there in the half-dark, faces lit only by her desk lamp running on backup battery. For a second, we both laughed, small, nervous, human. I'll get the fuse box, she said, standing up. I'll come with you, I offered. The storage room was narrow, the kind that forces people too close. I held the flashlight while she reached for the switches. Her shoulder brushed mine, and I swear I could feel her pulse in the air. Left one, I said quietly. She nodded, hair brushing against my cheek as she leaned in. I smelled rain on her skin, faint perfume, and something tired but beautiful, like surrender that hadn't happened yet. When the light flicked back on, we both froze. Still close. Still caught in the kind of silence that could turn into anything if either of us let it. Then her phone buzzed. She flinched, picked it up. A name flashed across the screen. Mark X. She didn't answer, just turned it face down. Her hands trembled again. He still calls, she said quietly, almost to herself. Every few weeks. Like he's checking if I'm still the same. I wanted to tell her she wasn't, that I could see it, the way her laugh had changed, the way she carried herself now. But the words wouldn't come. So I just stood there. Too close. not moving. When she finally looked up, our eyes met, not in a way that asked, but in a way that almost did. And for a heartbeat, I thought she might close the distance. But then she whispered, steady again, "You should go, Eli." I did. But I left the flashlight on the counter, still glowing, because it felt wrong to take the only bit of light that was left between us. It had been a week since the storm. A week since the storage room and the flashlight I never came back for. I told myself it was better this way. That space would settle whatever had started between us. But space doesn't settle anything. It just lets the ache spread out. When Liam asked me to pick up the car, I said yes before I could think twice. The shop looked the same. Same smell, same hum of machines, but she wasn't at the counter. I waited longer than I needed to, tapping my thumb against the metal, half hoping she wouldn't come out at all. Then she did. "Didn't think you'd be the one picking it up," she said, wiping her hands. "Didn't think you'd be here this late." I'm always here this late. It wasn't the kind of conversation people have when they're fine. The words came out too measured, too careful. She handed me the keys, our fingers almost touching, but not quite. That invisible pull between us, it hadn't faded. If anything, it felt sharper now, like silence that cuts instead of soothes. I finally said it, low enough that I wasn't sure I wanted her to hear. "You've been avoiding me." Her eyes lifted, steady but tired. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm trying to be an adult." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Is that what this is? Being an adult?" She set the clipboard down and exhaled. "Eli, what are we doing?" The question hung in the air like smoke, shapeless, impossible to catch. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to tell her I didn't know, that it wasn't supposed to feel like this, that I hadn't planned for her voice to live in my head the way it did. But every word felt wrong before it even left my mouth. She filled the silence instead. "You remind me of everything I used to want before I got tired of wanting." The way she said it, not dramatic, not sad, just plain, made my chest tighten. "I don't mean to," I said quietly. "I know," she said. "That's the worst part." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the rain starting again outside, soft, reluctant. She leaned back against the counter, arms folded, eyes glassy under the low light. "I shouldn't have said your name that way," she whispered. That night, I swallowed hard. I didn't imagine it then. Her lips parted like she wanted to deny it, but no words came. We stood there, two people who'd run out of excuses but still couldn't take a step forward. She looked at me finally, the kind of look that finds you even when you try to hide. "You should go," she said again, but her voice broke this time. I didn't move. I just watched her. And in the quiet between us, I understood something cruel and true. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of words. It's the sound of something ending before it ever begins. I wasn't supposed to see her again. That's what I kept telling myself. But 2 weeks later, I found myself back at the shop. No reason, no appointment, just the kind of pull that doesn't make sense when you try to name it. She was in the back, bent over the hood of a car. Music played low from an old radio, a slow guitar line tangled with the sound of rain against the windows. When she noticed me, her expression didn't soften or harden. It just paused. "Car trouble?" she asked. "No, just walking by. You don't live anywhere near here." I almost smiled. "You remember where I live?" Her eyes flickered. "You're hard to forget, apparently." That small confession hung in the air longer than either of us intended. There was a photo on her workbench, half buried under invoices and a wrench. I saw it only because the light from the desk lamp caught it just right. A younger man, maybe my age, standing beside Claire in front of a half-restored car. He had her smile, the same half-hidden one, and the same tired hope in his eyes. She noticed my gaze and went still. Slowly, she reached for the photo, brushing off a streak of dust before setting it upright. "That was my brother," she said finally. "Tom." I nodded, unsure what to say. "He used to work here," she added, voice thinning. "This was his place before. Well, before it wasn't." The silence after that sentence wasn't empty. It was full of everything she wasn't saying. I waited. She didn't look at me when she spoke next. "He died 3 years ago. Car accident. I was supposed to pick him up that night. I was late." She said it like a fact, but her hands gave her away, gripping the edge of the workbench until her knuckles whitened. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words that came out felt too small. I'm sorry. I know, she whispered. Everyone says that. Her laugh was thin, breaking halfway through. You even look a bit like him sometimes. Not really, but enough that it's confusing. That landed somewhere deep and quiet. The air between us shifted, not in the way it had before, but in something heavier, more fragile. I didn't move closer, but I wanted to. She turned the photo face down. You remind me of the part of him that wasn't broken yet. I stood there, unable to breathe for a moment. And that's a bad thing. It's dangerous, she said softly. Because I start talking to you like I used to talk to him, when I thought there was still time to fix things. Her voice caught at the end, the faintest crack. I should have stepped back. I should have said something to make it lighter. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching her fight the kind of grief that doesn't ask for comfort, only understanding. She finally looked at me, eyes glassy but steady. That's what this was, Eli? Not a spark. A shadow. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because for the first time, I realized maybe she wasn't wrong. Maybe what I'd mistaken for something beginning was just something trying to heal in the wrong person. And yet, when she brushed past me on her way to lock up, her sleeve grazed mine. Soft, familiar, almost deliberate. And I knew, whatever it was, it still wasn't over. I didn't see Claire for a while after that night. I tried not to. But grief has its own gravity, and so does unfinished conversation. When I finally went back, it wasn't raining this time. The air was still, the kind of late afternoon quiet that feels too fragile to break. She was outside, sitting on the curb beside a stack of tires, cigarette burning low between her fingers though she wasn't smoking it. She looked up when she heard my steps. No surprise, no tension, just recognition. Didn't expect you, she said. I didn't plan it. She half smiled, eyes tired. You never do. I sat beside her, close enough to smell the faint mix of engine oil and lavender soap. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The sound of the street, the hum of a far-off bus, the rattle of wind, filled the space between breaths. I shouldn't have said what I said, she murmured at last. About my brother. About you. You told the truth, I said. That doesn't make it fair. I glanced at her. Maybe not. But it made things real. Her fingers brushed against the pavement, drawing invisible lines in the dust. Real isn't always good, Eli. Maybe not, I said quietly. But it's better than pretending. She let out a slow breath. You're too young to talk like that. Maybe you're too old to keep hiding from it. That made her laugh. A real laugh this time. Small and reluctant, but warm. It felt like sunlight after weeks of gray. When it faded, she leaned forward, resting her arms on her knees. You know, I thought I'd run out of chances to feel anything. That maybe quiet was all I deserved. You still think that? She looked at me then, really looked, like she was searching for something she didn't want to find. Not when you're here. The words weren't loud or meant to be, but they were enough to make the air shift, softer, thinner. I didn't move closer. I didn't have to. She reached first, just her hand, brushing against mine. Not a grab, not a hold. Just touch, tentative and fragile. It was the smallest thing, but it carried everything we hadn't said. The nights we tried to forget, the words we swallowed, the ache that never quite fit anywhere. We sat like that for a while. Two people who had run out of ways to explain themselves. When she finally spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. We don't know where this goes. I know, I said. But for once, maybe that's okay. She nodded, eyes wet but steady. Then she let her hand rest fully in mine. No hesitation this time. No kiss. No confession. Just the weight of something real, finally unguarded. The sun was setting, turning the shop windows gold. The cigarette between her fingers had gone out completely, but she didn't notice. And in that quiet, I realized love doesn't always arrive like a spark. Sometimes, it just stops pretending to hide. It's been 6 months since that evening outside the shop. Funny how something that small, a quiet touch, a sentence left unfinished, can redraw the shape of your entire life. Claire still works there. Sometimes I stop by, sometimes I don't. When I do, She greets me the same way she greets anyone, but there's always that small pause, the unspoken acknowledgement that we remember, that we haven't forgotten the silence that changed us. We don't talk about that night. Not directly. We don't need to. It exists in the small, ordinary things. The way she hands me a coffee before I ask. The way she catches my eye when a song comes on the radio that neither of us admits we both remember. I think what I learned is that love doesn't always demand a name. Sometimes it's not even love, not the kind you can explain anyway. It's something quieter, something that asks you to pay attention, to stay. She once told me she used to measure her days by what she lost. Now, she says, she measures them by what still feels alive. I guess I'm part of that measure, and she's part of mine. I found the flashlight I'd left behind that night. She'd kept it, tucked away in a drawer, battery dead, still faintly scratched from when I dropped it. When I picked it up again, she just smiled and said, "You always forget your light somewhere." We laughed, but I knew what she meant. Things didn't turn into a storybook ending. There was no grand confession, no dramatic embrace. Just something true that settled between us. A quiet understanding that not everything needs to be more than it is to matter. I'm different now. Less certain, maybe, but softer. More aware of how easy it is to miss the people who remind you of who you were before the world made you careful. Sometimes, when I walk past the shop at dusk, I still hear her voice in my head. The way she whispered my name that first night. It doesn't haunt me anymore. It just lingers, like an echo that found peace. And maybe that's all the closure anyone really gets. Not an ending, but a calm place to stand after everything's been said and survived. If you've ever met someone who made the world feel too loud and too quiet at the same time, you probably know what I mean. Tell me, would you have stayed that night? Or would you have walked away, too late to pretend it meant nothing?